Mansoureh Khojasteh, the wife of Iran's slain supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, has died from injuries sustained during Saturday's airstrikes that killed her husband. She had been in a coma since the strikes that launched Operation Epic Fury. She was 78 years old and had been married to Khamenei since 1964, his only wife for 62 years. This is devastating news for what remains of Iran's leadership and for millions of Iranians who supported the regime. First, they lose their supreme leader, the most powerful figure in Iranian government for 35 years. Now they lose his wife, who was by his side for over 6 decades. The symbolism is enormous. Khamenei and his wife weren't just killed separately. They died together as a result of the same American-Israeli strike. The regime's most powerful couple, the face of the Islamic Republic for an entire generation, eliminated in a single military operation. Iranian media reports that Khojasteh had been in a coma since Saturday's strikes. She survived the initial attack but never regained consciousness. For 3 days she clung to life while Iran's new leadership scrambled to consolidate power. Now she's gone, adding another layer of trauma to a regime already reeling from catastrophic military losses. Khamenei was among dozens of senior Iranian leaders killed in the first wave of the joint U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. That strike decapitated Iran's leadership structure. Supreme leader gone. Top Revolutionary Guard commanders gone. Senior clerics gone. The entire top tier of the regime eliminated in coordinated precision strikes. And now Khamenei's wife of 62 years is dead from the same attack. When you understand what this means for Iranian morale, for the regime's stability, and for the psychological impact on both Iran's leadership and its people, you'll realize Operation Epic Fury isn't just destroying Iran's military capability, it's destroying the regime's legitimacy and will to fight. Let me walk you through who Mansoureh Khojasteh was, what her death means for Iran, and why the targeting of Iran's leadership is achieving strategic effects beyond just military damage. Mansoureh Khojasteh married Ali Khamenei in 1964 when he was a young cleric beginning his religious and political career. This was 15 years before the 1979 Islamic Revolution that brought the clerics to power in Iran. She was with him through his entire rise to power, through the revolution that overthrew the Shah, through the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, through his selection as supreme leader in 1989 after Ayatollah Khamenei died, through 35 years of leading the Islamic Republic. In a society where polygamy is religiously permitted and politically powerful men often have multiple wives, Khamenei had only one wife for 62 years. That suggests a genuine partnership, not just a political arrangement. In Iranian culture, particularly among religious conservatives, the wife of such a powerful figure would be deeply respected. She wasn't just married to the supreme leader. She was the first lady of the Islamic Republic, though that's not an official title in Iran's theocratic system. She maintained a relatively private life compared to Western political spouses. But within Iran's clerical and political circles, she was a significant figure. The matriarch of the Khamenei family, the woman who stood beside Iran's most powerful man for 6 decades. And now she's dead, killed by American bombs targeting her husband's office. Collateral damage in a military strike that decapitated Iran's leadership. The fact that she was in her husband's office when the strike happened tells us something important. This wasn't a residential compound hit at night, when only security would be present. This was a working office during operational hours. Khamenei was conducting regime business when American and Israeli forces struck. That means intelligence knew exactly when and where Khamenei would be. They knew his schedule. They knew his location. They timed the strike for maximum effectiveness when senior leadership would be present. Khojasteh being there suggests she was either meeting with her husband or present in the building for some regime function. Either way, she was close enough to the blast to sustain fatal injuries even if she wasn't the primary target. She survived the initial strike but never recovered. 3 days in a coma, 3 days of Iran's medical system trying to save the supreme leader's wife, 3 days of the regime hoping she would pull through. She didn't, and her death adds another psychological blow to a regime already suffering devastating losses. Let's talk about the strategic targeting that killed both Khamenei and ultimately his wife, because the precision of these strikes is significant. Operation Epic Fury's first wave targeted Iran's senior leadership with simultaneous strikes across multiple locations. Khamenei wasn't the only high-value target hit. Dozens of senior leaders were killed in coordinated attacks. This required extraordinary intelligence. You don't just know where one person is. You know where dozens of senior leaders are simultaneously. You know their schedules, their security protocols, their locations at specific times. That level of intelligence penetration suggests either extensive human intelligence networks inside Iran, providing real-time information, or signals intelligence so sophisticated that Iranian communication security was completely compromised, or both. The strikes were timed to hit when maximum leadership would be present at their offices. Not residences, not mosques. Working offices where regime business was being conducted. That maximizes casualties among decision-makers and minimizes civilian casualties. It's precision targeting designed to decapitate the regime while limiting collateral damage. But Khojasteh's death shows that even precision strikes have unintended consequences. She probably wasn't a target, but she was close enough to Khamenei's office to be fatally wounded when it was destroyed. From a military perspective, that's acceptable collateral damage. From a psychological warfare perspective, it might even be beneficial. The regime's supporters see that even the supreme leader's wife wasn't safe. Nobody is safe. American and Israeli intelligence can find anyone, anywhere, anytime. That creates terror among remaining leadership. If Khamenei wasn't safe in his own office with his wife present, who is safe? Every surviving regime official knows they could be next. Now let's talk about what Khojasteh's death means for Iranian morale and regime legitimacy. For Iranians who supported the regime, Khamenei was more than just a political leader. He was the supreme leader, the religious authority, the successor to Ayatollah Khamenei, who led the 1979 revolution. His wife was part of that symbolic package, the faithful couple who led the Islamic Republic, the religious family representing Iran's theocratic values. Their deaths together, especially with her suffering for 3 days before dying, creates a martyrdom narrative. But it's a martyrdom narrative that cuts both ways. Regime supporters will say they died together defending the Islamic Republic against the American-Israeli assault. They'll be portrayed as martyrs who gave their lives for the revolution and for resistance against Western imperialism. But the fact that they died helpless, unable to defend themselves, in an attack they clearly didn't see coming, undermines the regime's narrative of strength and divine protection. If Allah was truly on the regime's side, why didn't He protect the supreme leader and his wife? If the Islamic Republic is God's government on earth preparing for the Mahdi's return, why are its leaders being killed like this? These are questions Iranians are asking, even those who supported the regime. And the regime has no good answers. For Iranians who oppose the regime, Khamenei's death was celebrated. Videos showed people dancing in the streets, lighting fireworks, cheering that the dictator was finally gone. But Khojasteh's death might generate some sympathy even among regime opponents. She wasn't a political figure making decisions. She was an elderly woman married to a powerful man. Some Iranians who celebrated Khamenei's death might feel sadness about his wife's suffering and death. That complexity of emotions, celebrating the dictator's death while feeling sympathy for his widow, reflects the psychological complexity of what's happening in Iran right now. The regime is being destroyed, but real people are dying, and not all of them were regime officials making evil decisions. Some were family members who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now let's talk about the new Iranian leadership and how Khojasteh's death affects their consolidation of power. We know from recent reports that new potential Iranian leadership has contacted President Trump asking to talk. They want negotiations. They're signaling willingness to make a deal. These new leaders are trying to establish legitimacy quickly. They need to convince the Iranian people and the international community that they can govern, that they represent a break from Khamenei's hardline policies, that they're willing to make peace. But Khojasteh's death reminds everyone that these new leaders are stepping into power over the bodies of their predecessors. Khamenei and his wife both dead from American strikes. Dozens of other senior leaders killed. The regime's entire top tier eliminated. The new leadership exists only because the old leadership was annihilated. That's not exactly a strong foundation for legitimacy. If they're seen as puppets installed by American military force, they'll have no credibility with the Iranian people. If they make concessions to Trump that Khamenei would never have accepted, they'll be accused of betraying the revolution. But if they don't make concessions, Operation Epic Fury continues. More bombing, more destruction, more deaths. And eventually they might end up like Khamenei, killed in their offices along with their families. So they're caught. Make a deal and be seen as American puppets. Don't make a deal and face continued military destruction. Khojasteh's death adds to this pressure. Her funeral will be another reminder of what American military power can do, another reminder that nobody is safe, another opportunity for Iranians to ask whether continuing resistance is worth this cost. Let's talk about the propaganda value of Khojasteh's death for both sides. Iran's regime media will portray her as a martyr, a faithful wife who stood by the supreme leader until death, a symbol of Islamic resistance who gave her life defending the revolution. They'll use her funeral for massive propaganda purposes. Pictures of her coffin draped in Iranian flags, mourners weeping, clerics giving speeches about her devotion and sacrifice. This serves multiple purposes. It rallies regime supporters around martyrdom narrative. It generates sympathy for the human cost of American strikes. It creates emotional investment in continuing the fight to avenge her death. But the United States and Israel can counter this propaganda easily. She died because she was married to a dictator who oppressed the Iranian people for 35 years, who funded terrorism across the Middle East, who pursued nuclear weapons in defiance of international community, who chose confrontation over peace. Her death is tragic, but it's a direct consequence of her husband's choices. He chose to remain in his office conducting regime business during a war. He chose to have his wife present in a military target. His decisions led to her death. That's a powerful counter-narrative. Khojasteh didn't die for the revolution. She died because Khamenei's arrogance and refusal to seek peace put her in danger. The truth is probably somewhere between these narratives. She was neither a glorious martyr nor a helpless victim. She was a woman married to a powerful man who made choices that had consequences for everyone around him, including her. Now let's talk about what happens at her funeral, because this will be a significant moment. In Iranian culture, funerals are major social and political events, especially for important figures. Khamenei's funeral would have been massive, millions of people if the regime could organize it safely. But can they? With Operation Epic Fury ongoing, can Iran's new leadership organize massive public gatherings without risking another American strike? If they try to hold a state funeral for Khojasteh with thousands or millions of attendees, they're creating a target-rich environment. Senior regime officials will attend. Revolutionary Guard commanders, clerics, political leaders, all gathered in one place. That's exactly the kind of opportunity American and Israeli intelligence would exploit for another decapitation strike. So the new leadership faces another impossible choice. Honor Khojasteh with the funeral she deserves, risking another strike that kills more leaders. Or have a small private funeral, showing weakness and inability to protect public gatherings. Either choice undermines them. Either they risk more deaths or they show they're too afraid of American strikes to hold public events. This is the psychological warfare dimension of Operation Epic Fury. Every decision Iran's new leadership makes is constrained by fear of American military action. They can't operate normally, they can't appear in public safely, they can't even bury their dead without risking more attacks. That's how you break an enemy's will to fight. Not just by destroying their military capability, but by making them afraid to do anything. Here's the bottom line and why this matters. Mansoureh Khojasteh, wife of slain Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei for 62 years, died Monday from injuries sustained in Saturday's strikes that killed her husband. She was 78 years old and had been in a coma since the attack. She was in Khamenei's office when American-Israeli strikes hit, killing him and dozens of other senior Iranian leaders. She survived initially, but never regained consciousness. Her death is symbolic devastation for the regime, the supreme leader and his wife of 6 decades, both killed by the same American operation, the most powerful couple in Iran for a generation eliminated together. For regime supporters, they're martyrs. For regime opponents, they're dictators who got what they deserved. For most Iranians, it's a complicated mix of emotions. New Iranian leadership trying to consolidate power now has to deal with another funeral, another reminder of American military superiority, another moment showing nobody was safe under the old regime. They've already contacted Trump asking to negotiate. Khojasteh's death increases pressure to make a deal before more leaders and their families are killed. But making concessions risks being seen as puppets. Not making concessions risks continued Operation Epic Fury bombing until everyone in leadership is dead like the Khameneis. Her funeral will be a major test. Can they organize it without risking another strike? Can they show strength while clearly being terrified? The regime is collapsing not just militarily, but psychologically. When the supreme leader and his wife die helpless in their office, what's left of the narrative of strength and divine protection? Mansoureh Khojasteh is dead. Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. Dozens of senior leaders are dead. Iran's new leadership is begging to talk to Trump. Operation Epic Fury is destroying more than military targets. It's destroying the regime's will to resist. The supreme leader's wife dying in a coma 3 days after American bombs killed her husband. That's the image defining this war. Total helplessness of Iran's leadership against American military power. And every surviving regime official knows we could be next.